Welcome to another episode of Fight the Burnout. Today we have Charles Crosby with us. But before we jump into that, I do want to remind you that this episode is sponsored by Create From Why, where we help law enforcement first responders really figure out who they are so that what they do keeps serving them, so they keep loving it and enjoying it like it's the first day. They have that purpose and they no longer burn out, especially in these days with everything going on. We really have to stay focused on those uplifting things. So if you're interested in that, just flick us an email, team@createfromwhy.com, or go to our website, createfromwhy.com, and we will have a talk with you there. But today, Charles Crosby, who is current Orlando Police Department police officer, he is also part in a few other things. He runs his own company that's all about leadership within policing, which I feel a lot of frontline cops are really want better leadership, whether depending on where you are. So this is going to be a good conversation. Charles, as always, I like to let you actually tell us who you are, because who better than the person to tell us. So why don't you take it away? Tell us who you are, what you do, and a little bit about your background.
Thanks, Chris. I really appreciate you having me on. Like you said, my name is Charles Crosby. You can call me Chuck if you want, either way. I'm a husband and a father of two preteens. I've got a just turned 12-year-old and about to turn 11-year-old. So they keep me pretty busy outside of work. I'm an avid reader, and I'm a lifelong advocate for learning, training, personal growth. I'm about to begin my 19th year at the Orlando Police Department, currently assigned as a patrol lieutenant on the overnight watch. I've got 3 supervisors and 30 officers, in theory, assuming we're fully staffed, assigned to me. During my career at Orlando, I've held positions in the neighborhood patrol unit, which is a bicycle unit assigned to Orlando Housing Authority properties. So a lot of government run, I guess, colloquially referred to as projects. I've worked in our field training unit with all of our new hires on doing onboarding. I've worked in the mounted unit. I was the supervisor for all of our horses and
That's
our
cool.
horse riders. And I've also worked in the criminal investigations division in both property crime section, and also as the supervisor for the special victims unit, which is sex crimes and crimes against children, internet crimes against children, that kind of thing. In addition, I've got 15 years experience as a crisis negotiator with the police department. I currently serve as the Florida Association of Hostage Negotiators Regional Training Director for Central Florida. I've been the team leader for the for the Critical Incident Stress Management Team, which is peer-to-peer support.
Yeah.
And I've also been my agency's lead trainer at one point in time for mental health and officer wellness. In addition to all that, I also teach at our local college for communication skills, especially for our basic law enforcement academy, our new incoming cops.
Yeah.
And in 2020, as you mentioned, I started my own training company focused on improving communication and leadership in the law enforcement profession. It's called Communication Synergy. I've been blessed to speak nationally and internationally on a variety of different topics, and I hope to be coaching, training, and consulting whenever my law enforcement career is complete.
Wow. So much stuff. First thing that's popped in my head though, what's your favorite position that you worked in so far?
Oh, that's a tough one. It's probably a tie because they go in two different reasons. I absolutely loved being a midnight shift patrol supervisor. Just, dealing hands-on with a brand new officer in our agency. Every officer, brand new officer goes to midnight shift. That's where they start.
Yeah.
And so hands-on training, new officers, lots of enthusiasm, lots of mistakes, trying to learn and grow and just be better every minute of every day. That was a lot of fun. And then I think that supervising the special victims unit was also, it's surprisingly for me, one of my favorite positions. I was not prepared at all to take over that unit when I was asked to do so, or when I was given the opportunity to do so. It took me about 4 months to overcome that feeling of being completely overwhelmed and out of my element. And then thankfully I had some really great detectives supporting me. And I know homicide investigators tend to get a lot of the credit. But I always have said that, you know, their victims are dead. You don't get to see their reaction when you solve the case. And for my detectives and the work that they did, there was nothing better than being able to get some resolution for some people who are just truly victimized in the worst way.
Yeah, no, I know in my policing career, dealt, had to deal with a few victims, and then obviously I didn't deal with it as frontline, patrol, but um, passed it to the detectives and that, and it's a different emotional level. I know, like, the families and that of homicides, but are affected in that. But when that happens to somebody, I know far too many people, and then helping people get into the police, you'd be surprised how many actually want to become police officers to help stop and prevent that from happening to somebody else because it's happened to them. Um, yeah, it's amazing. It's not amazing, but it's horrible, the trauma that it does do. So I praise you for doing that and leading that team. Um, you've done a lot. You've been a police officer for 19 years. You still love it?
I do. I do. I love going to work every day. It makes it better that I'm back on midnight shift with my guys who are all brand new officers and all brand new supervisors. Everybody wants to do a good job and be better than they were yesterday, and that's what I'm all about. So
That's awesome that I love the fact that I asked you that question and you're actually back there. So that's good to know. It's good to see that you've actually gone, hey, this is where I love, so this is where I'm going to be until the day that you don't, and then I'm sure you'll shift and change to somewhere different. Um, 19 years, I'm sure you've burned out. What would your
absolutely.
definition, what would you define burnout for you as? Because I know there's the Webster dictionary of it, but what would you define burnout for you as?
Yeah, for me, burnout was really just kind of that feeling of hopelessness. Really, that just it comes with trying to keep pace with the expectations you've set for yourself and that other people have set for you, and just being just having no idea of how you're going to be able to do that. It's exhaustion. It's running on empty, but not just running on empty. It's not knowing how to refill or where to go to
Yeah,
refill. It's just that there's just no there's no way to do anything right, correct,
yeah,
enough.
yeah.
So
No, I love that definition that you have for it and that you can define it so clearly. For listeners, I just want to, because I believe that burnout and PTSD coincide with each other, and one fuels the other. And pardon the dogs, I've just seen a dog outside, if you can hear them. But yeah, I believe that they coincide with each other, and one that almost help reinforce each other and cause the other one to kind of happen. And so I'm just going to read out, just for listeners and viewers and even for yourself, the Merriam-Webster definition of each one. And so burnout, they define it as exhaustion or physical or emotional exhaustion of physical or emotional strength or motivation, usually as a result of prolonged stress or frustration. So that's burnout. And we go to
mhm.
PTSD, and obviously we know now, over the last few years, they've recognized and they've started to talk about the fact that there's a cumulative PTSD. So if we can apply that here as well, a psychological reaction occurring after experiencing a highly stressing event. So if we look at the two
Yeah.
of those, they if you're constantly stressed out, you constantly got stuff that you're seeing, you're gonna obviously one's gonna create the other, or reduce, increase the chances of it. And I love the fact that you said you're not able to, you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, you don't see how you're able to actually get out of it. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience with actual burning out in your 19 years?
Yeah, I mean, just to piggyback on what you said, I don't know that it's just associated with or connected, correlated with post-traumatic stress disorder. Man, I see strong ties to anxiety and depression, or potentially both, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
hard for me to imagine a scenario where that isn't the case. Maybe not in the long-term diagnostic sense, but it definitely in the short term, the ability to manage that anxiety and pull yourself out of depression. There's a lot of mental health ties with regard to burnout.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, for me, from my experience, honestly, I did pretty good my first 12, 13 years of my career. I got promoted to sergeant probably, well, I did pretty good. Let me rephrase that. About the first 10 years of my career. I got promoted to sergeant at about 8.5 years. Went to midnights, loved every minute of that. And as the way that my department works is that newly promoted individuals go to midnights. Well, in order to make room for newly promoted individuals, you have to evict those midnight sergeants that have been there a while and send them off to day shift responsibilities unless they get selected for a specialized unit. So I put in for a specialized unit that I felt I was the best qualified person for. I think definitely on paper, there would be little doubt regarding that. And I wasn't selected. And that kind of, that bothered me a little bit. And then I was, I ended up being transferred to a day shift squad. And there's something about trying to do everything you possibly can to motivate and inspire individuals, and to really, the job of a police officer is to serve the community and to see people who maybe forget that that's priority number one, and then battle you head to head over what they should or shouldn't be doing on duty. It took a toll. I put in to be a supervisor of the criminal investigations unit 13 times before I was selected for that unit, in part because I had no relevant experience there. So while I was on day shift was probably, I think it was either the first or second time that I put in for that position and wasn't selected. I was given the opportunity to go to our mounted unit. I got to say, I hadn't ridden a horse in 20 years. I didn't really have any specific qualifications for that job. I can tell you that the competition, there's not many people who really look forward to scooping horse manure for a living. So
unless you're my aunt, she's got like 4 or 5 horses and seems to love scooping it every morning.
Right. It really is there's some people who are incredibly dedicated, and then there are other people who don't think that people in uniform should be doing that. But I was fortunate enough to get that opportunity, and I'll tell you what, that was a really good thing for me. They get to see that even things I didn't feel qualified for, that I didn't know much about, could really contribute to my overall development as a law enforcement professional. But for me, it wasn't my first choice. Yeah. And I kind of felt like I was making my contribution and biding my time to do the things that I wanted to do. And I still kept getting passed over for that opportunity to go to the criminal investigations division, or at least that's the way I viewed it, right? It wasn't that the people who were getting selected weren't qualified. It's that I felt like, at some point I've got to get an opportunity. Yeah. And it was rough. Supervising the unit with the mounted unit with the horses, it was definitely very entertaining. But one of the things that comes with that is you give the same speech to the same children on a regular basis. You do the same crowd control activities on a regular basis. It got really monotonous. And so I was fortunate after about 1.5 years, well, fortunate, unfortunate, I actually blew out my back. And it required a lower spinal fusion, which has, I have no doubt has a lot to do with wearing the belt for, let's see, that was 23rd. No, that one was 2017, the end of 2017. Yeah. That was my second back surgery. My first one was in 2013. Same place. So I have no doubt it has something to do with wearing the belt. But either way, fortunate, unfortunate, I blew out my back. I had required a spinal fusion, and that was going to take me out of uniform for at a minimum 6 months, if not a year. So I put in my resignation from the mounted unit, not going to ride horses anymore after back surgery. And I
can only imagine like all that weight in that of the vest and your belt and all of that. Yeah. On a horse. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the nice thing is you're sitting down. The not so nice thing is they are their own little heaters. And in Florida, in Orlando, In
Yeah.
the summer, that's a
Oh,
really exhausting
yeah, that
way to
humidity,
spend your
man.
day. Um, so yeah, so I had the opportunity. I resigned my position with the mounted unit. I ended up back on midnight shift patrol, which I absolutely love. I had an opportunity to go to somewhere I was familiar with, spent a few months there. Then I got to transfer somewhere I wasn't familiar with, a whole new cast of characters. Everybody knew, and it was amazing. I actually had a really good time. And then I finally, after 13 tries, I was selected for the criminal investigations division as a property unit supervisor. And I spent a month there. And then there were major organizational changes. And after 1 month of learning the job of a supervisor in criminal investigations, my captain came to me and said, "I'd like for you to take over the special victims unit." And I was like, "I am totally not equipped for this. Totally not equipped for this." So there's this learning period, there's this learning process, and it was just completely overwhelming. The idea that you're going to fail the victims of these investigations, or the detectives who are well invested and very knowledgeable about the investigative process in these cases. Your sex crimes victims, your crimes against your children victims. It's just it was a lot, and I tried to dive fully into it. I mean, just full bore into it, and it was a lot. I'm very grateful that I had a good support network. I had people with a lot of experience who were able to basically hold my hand and walk me through a lot of the different processes until I could get my feet under me. But I don't know that I ever really felt like I was doing a good enough job. As the supervisor for the unit, you have some oversight on the investigations, but you also have to manage the personalities, and that is a super stress-filled environment. Those personalities bump heads from time to time. You do your best to kind of manage those conflicts,
Yeah.
but I don't think there's any way to say you really manage them to the satisfaction of both parties. You might win
There'll
with
be
one and
so
lose
much
with the other.
emotion flying in that as well,
Uh,
because it's such a personal thing. Murders is a totally different level, but we talked about before. Homicides are, to the body, there's no emotional connection, or at least that's how I
yeah,
always felt. And I feel a lot of cops, they say the same thing. There's no emotional connection. When somebody's living and they've gone through something, there's an emotional connection.
yes, and you can see it on their face when they
Yeah,
walk into the station and they want to talk to you about the case, or they need to talk to you about the case. You
yeah,
need to talk to them about the case, and
yeah,
you're looking at this individual who's been through something that it is incredibly difficult, especially for me, as a not only as a male but as a supervisor, without that opportunity to really dig into the empathy that goes with dealing with victims on a regular basis. That's the gravity of those situations. I mean, I can't give enough credit to the detectives who do that on a regular basis. It's absolutely incredible. And I can't, those are people whose ability to manage stress is really
yeah,
something to behold.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, I was in that position, and then I got to kind of step off the tracks, right? Because that's the primary focus of my career. And I look at my hostage negotiation career. I started that in 2008, and became the lead trainer for our hostage negotiation team in 2010. So I took on those training responsibilities. Part of that was because of my position within the agency was part of our training unit. And so I kind of took it over without really having enough experience to put context to theory.
Yeah.
And so I kind of felt there was a lot of imposter syndrome going on, where I'm going in and I'm a proficient trainer. I can stand in front of people and talk and convey information, but do I really have the context to deliver that information with the right kind of emphasis, where it means something to the people? And so I was doing that from 2010 till 2016. And then we had the Pulse nightclub terror attack in June 12th of
Yes.
2016.
Totally forgot
And
about that, but remember it all now.
yeah, and so I had been the lead trainer for the negotiation team for 6 years at that point. Just by kind of the luck of the way things rolled out, I ended up being the coach for the negotiator who was on the phone. So the primary is talking to him. I'm listening directly to that conversation, and I'm supposed to be advising the negotiator on tactics, strategies to get to a peaceful resolution, which in that case would have been um, hopefully him coming out and surrendering to the officers outside. And I can tell you that I completely dropped the ball on my responsibilities. I was overwhelmed. I didn't know. I don't even know if I can say I didn't know what to do. I didn't even get to the point where I was thinking about what I should be doing. I was absolutely caught in the performance loop of, this has never happened to me before. Bad things are happening to people. Bad things have happened to people. There's now a hostage situation. If we screw this up, then there's going to be death, tragedy. If we don't talk this guy out, it's going to mean failure. It's going to mean it could potentially cost lives, right? And so there was a lot on that, and we were not successful in negotiating a peaceful resolution. Now, I say that with the caveat that I don't know that even if we had done everything by whatever book is written on negotiating with a terrorist, that there would have been a peaceful resolution, right? But I know that at the end of that incident, what I was aware of is we did not talk that person out, which was our job, our responsibility. And so that was difficult. And you see your team members, you see I was a supervisor at that point. Some of my former officers were first responders to that. And you see a lot of you talk about PTSD, and Pulse, as a result of Pulse, the Orlando Police Department had its first medical retirement as a result of PTSD and has had a couple since then.
Yeah.
Also.
I'd expect it. Sad, but I'd expect it.
Yeah. But when you talk about PTSD, there's a lot of different things that also contribute to that. And one of those was just an absolute a real lack of awareness of the impact of those events on the officers who responded to it. And when I say that is, I have no doubt that the leadership of our organization, which I love the Orlando Police Department to death, I have no doubt that the leadership of the organization probably felt the same way I did when I say that, here we are on the phone with this guy, and I have never really thought about this before. I have no doubt the leadership after the fact was like, oh my gosh, we just had this incident and we have no idea what's going to happen. I can tell you what happened in retrospect is, every political figure needed to come in and be seen. There were candlelight vigils, extensive, and all of those require police resources.
Yep. So there's more stress on the police that are already stressed out because of what just happened. Because you guys hadn't had any kind of big thing that had happened like that prior.
Not like that.
No.
Not like that.
Had Florida had anything prior? I can't even remember anything that there's been like a big, massive.
You'd have to go back. Yeah, you'd have to go back some years. Miami had a large bank robbery situation that went bad.
But no terror attack as such.
But yeah, not a terror attack.
Yeah, so it's all unprecedented. I mean, the rest of the country has them. Depending on whatever they've got different ones that are happening in that, but Florida hadn't. So you've got these officers who aren't prepared for it. It'd be like it's like when we had the Christchurch terror attack that happened here. Same thing. We had no precedent for it whatsoever. It was this is never going to happen to us over here. But
Yes.
yeah, no. So yeah, so then everybody, yeah, so you have all that pressure of everything afterwards. All the politicians are going, this is what we're going to do, and people don't realize this. My background is for about 4 years. I was diplomatic protection, so I did like our version of Secret Service. So I know how all that works, and I know the resources it takes on uniform when somebody high up comes in. We had Biden come over when he was vice president. Literally, you talk about resources. We had the helicopter. We had everything going on, and yeah, it takes up those resources. So then you guys got all that stress. Okay, cool. Yeah, yeah. Okay, get it.
Yeah, and the same guys. So the Pulse terror attack happened. What was a Saturday night shift, and the way our shift rotations work is those same people had to be back at work Sunday night, and so they were.
Yeah, because that's what we do.
Yeah, they were, and some were in better shape than others, and the ability to kind of manage that stress and recognize what the officers needed in order to be successful that night was really wasn't adequate. And I say that kind of as a general way, not to criticize leadership specifically, but to say we collectively did not do a good job of supporting the officers who were the responders to that incident. And then when you look at those dignitary visits and those candlelight vigils, they happened on the Monday, Tuesday, which was the day off for those same responding officers who all now got ordered to go work those details because you have to staff them.
Yeah.
And so
it brings up all those emotions by just going back and revisiting and never actually dealing with it. It brings back up all those emotions, even though it feels like it's just you're just static, you're just standing there. It's all the emotional side of stuff, and so all of a sudden you're on this high alert of, because you've just been in that traumatic thing of, is this going to happen again? And that, like you said, that mind goes into all the things of the imposter syndrome, the what could I have done better, what should I have done, yeah, I haven't ever had to experience it, thankfully, but I can only imagine.
Yeah, and I know for a lot of the people that I've spoken with, really what and I can speak for myself personally on this, is what I wanted was an opportunity to disconnect. Just give me time and space to process what's going on. And that opportunity was delayed by at least a week for most of us because of all the mandatory things that had to happen, including the things that are meant to be positive, like your critical incident stress debriefing, right? The resources, here's the resources available to you. Here's your opportunity to talk about your experience, those things, but they were all mandatory attendance. And so, here I am.
Intent
Here I am
behind
with
it is not I want to help myself and I want to get better. It's you're now telling me, and you're already in that fight or flight, and you're in that fight most likely still because you've never switched off, haven't had the opportunity to switch off and actually sit in the be here. The mind goes straight to, you're now telling me what to do, so I'm going to fight it, just subconsciously.
Yeah. Absolutely. So you talk about that post-traumatic stress, right? You got that hypervigilant response, that constantly looking for danger. You also have the persistent re-experiencing, right? We're going back. What could I have done differently over and over again? Yeah. And you keep getting placed right back in uniform in that role that you're representing. So that was 2016. Yeah, there were a lot of things that kind of came to a head right in that window of 2016, 2017, 2018, that really just kind of pushed hard at my ability to manage work life. And that is not even counting the home life, right?
The kids that you have that are now preteens.
Yeah, right. In 2010, my daughter was born. 2011, my son was born. And so by the time 2014 rolls around, where I'm getting shipped off to day shift, I'm a wreck. I'm not sleeping. I'm overworking. I'm picking up details left and right because my wife worked when we got married, and she worked up until we had our first kid. And then she retired, and I have to make up the salary difference.
Yeah.
And so there was
so there's the,
yeah,
instead of figuring out, okay, cool, how do we reduce our expenses and the financial education, which I know a lot of cops are like, I know a lot of actual ex-police officers in the US that have gone into the financial things to help out officers in that specific type of situation, because it's not necessarily I need to make up that. It's like, okay, cool, how do we find that balance point so you don't get that overstressed and that overworking, no sleeping, the because it just it just compounds all of it.
yeah. So I could tell you my Fridays were usually work a Friday shift and then go work overnight out at Universal Studios, or somewhere where I could pick up a 8-hour shift for a little bit extra money. And so my sleep patterns were all jacked up. It wasn't consistent, it wasn't regular, and it really never, it's still to this day, it hasn't gotten back to any semblance of normalcy. I have to take medicine to help me sleep, and even that sometimes is hit or miss. So yeah, there's a lot of different parts kind of all piled in there. So yeah, I had like a 4 or 5 year window where, I mean, I'd say 2014, end of 2014, 2015 is when I really started to feel the burnout, but it probably wasn't until 2019 that I was able to put a finger on it and say something's wrong.
You recognize
like, we gotta fix this. And I laugh because I'm like, I don't know if that's a product of the profession or my gender or what it is, where it takes so long to acknowledge the fact that I don't have the tools, I don't have the equipment at this point in time to deal with that, right? And to actually go and to seek help. And I'll tell you what did it for me is in 2018, I got right after back surgery, since I was sitting around doing nothing really in a giant back brace. I got asked to lead a department-wide initiative for mental health training and officer wellness training at the agency. And, I'd been a trainer by that time, 11 years at the agency. And so I take my training responsibilities quite seriously, and I accepted that. Went through the train the trainer program and sat up there, and there's nothing better than, you can go through a train the trainer program, right? You can go through training, you can sit in and attend training, and that's one thing. But then experiencing that in the real world, and or trying to then turn around and teach it, that does nothing but highlight really the things that you probably didn't really have a context for when you sat through training. And I can tell you, in teaching that, and where I was at that point in my life, I mean, I finally turned around and was like, I need help. I need help. So it was late spring in 2019 when I finally reached out for help. I went to counseling, got therapists, went to a psychiatrist, diagnosed with anxiety, generalized anxiety disorder, diagnosed with depression. We had a conversation about whether or not a PTSD diagnosis was appropriate, and at that point I told her no. So we haven't had that conversation
again worried about that gun and badge, I'm sure.
Exactly, absolutely, yeah, the stigma that comes with that.
Even being told that you had a form of depression and anxiety is like, fuck, am I gonna what's gonna happen? Am I getting that red flag on my file now? It's like,
yeah,
it's like, let's not do this through the department, let's do this external. It's
a
horrible thing.
I absolutely did it externally, not through the department. But it was a really good thing by the time and it took a little bit to get medicine balanced, to get on the right dosages, to sort things out. But once it did, everything improved. Sleeping better, being able to handle things better, being able to manage things better. And just taking the edge off was really something that opened the door for me to be able to regain that sense of control, that autonomy that I have over my own ability to manage kind of the process of what I was doing, the burnout, the stress, the anxiety, the disappointment, the depression over whether or not I was performing to my expectations, or these undefined expectations of anybody else that was in my area, in my chain of command, whatever the case was. So Yeah,
Yeah,
it
no,
was
that's an amazing. It's amazing. Like you've done and experienced so much stuff. Um, Question: do you still require any of the meds or anything today, or is it you work through it all?
No, I absolutely, I use the meds every day.
Yeah,
We had this discussion. I talked to my psychiatrist about whether or not it was something we could wean off of, and she said, well, we can try. And yeah, that didn't work so well.
yeah,
So it's definitely something, at least at this point, while I'm still employed and doing the job of a police officer, I think that's probably something that's a permanent part of my life, and it
yeah,
just kind of helps to keep me in that mindset, that mind frame where I can uh, not catastrophize, right?
yeah,
Not constantly refocus on all of the negative things that are happening. And I can't imagine what the last 2 years as a police officer would have been like if I was still in
yeah.
that loop
Oh man.
of of just that negative reinforcement, negative thought loop that just keeps going back
Yeah,
over and over again to find the other things that you missed last time you were assessing what you did wrong.
yeah. No, I think that's so important, and one I want to praise you for being open about it because I know it does normalize it for people, especially for officers. They're like, oh, I can't do the job if I'm on anything. So I want to, praise you for that, and it does. I never did meds, but I've spent a ton of money and time on personal development, and that
Mhm.
and ended up not needing meds. But I can see, I know people that are like, but it's awesome. It's awesome that you've gotten this balance that you're able to do it. The goal is obviously to one day not need them, as you said. I want to come back to. There's so much good stuff. One, yeah, just thanks for thanks for saying for telling it all out there. Um, 13 times to apply and then only did it for a month.
So yeah, so that's 13 times to apply, and the way that it works is your entry level position into the investigations division is at property. So I only did property for a month, but I
Yeah.
stayed in criminal investigations. I just transferred
Uh,
to special victims.
Special victims. Okay, cool,
So
perfect. Glad I asked that and clarified that because I know there will be people that will be like probably have the same thought that I did. All right, perfect. So you had the criminal investigation. There's so much that's happened over your 19 years. How do you believe the trauma? Because I know as police officers, we go, the trauma. It's whatever. It's just part of the job. We work through it. We deal with it. How do you feel that the trauma has, up till that day that, and as you said, it probably, the Pulse shooting and the Pulse terror attack was a turning point, is what it sounded like, was a turning point for you, and started to kind of create that spiral as such, I guess, that you then recognized in 2018 when you went on to the, got shoulder tap to do the mental health stuff. How do you believe that the trauma that you experienced leading up to the Pulse terror had an impact on how you reacted to your role in the negotiation side?
that's an interesting question. I guess my knee-jerk reaction is to say it didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I say that with the full acknowledgement that the story, when people say, "Hey, you're a cop, tell me a story," the story they want to hear is about trauma.
Yeah.
And if you're a storyteller, those are all of the stories that you have, and you
Yeah.
carry them with you from the very beginning of your career. And people are like, "Yeah, it's just good storytelling." No, it's not. It's relive. It's that re-experiencing those trauma events every time. And does it numb it a little by telling a story? Maybe it does, but that doesn't mean the trauma isn't there.
Yeah.
Yeah, Pulse was. I can tell you in retrospect, for a full week after Pulse, I was a mess. Now, did I
Mm-hmm.
know it at the time? Not really. I remember I screaming at a captain who had called me to inform me that something needed to be done. I mean, I lost my ever loving mind on this captain, and had it been another captain, I probably would have been in trouble. Thankfully, this one was a far more patient.
Yeah.
But at the time, it didn't even dawn on me that there were things going on outside of just the general circumstances. And so yeah, Pulse did two things, right? It pushed that button, but it also gave me a little bit of insight into things I could do to help manage a lot of that stress. Because one of the things that I was able to do in the aftermath of Pulse was to develop a presentation for the agency that talked about the shortcomings of our negotiation strategy with the Pulse terrorists. What we did, what we actually did, what we could have done better, how agencies who could potentially face something similar in the future can do better. And it really gave me an avenue that helped me. I guess at the time I looked at it as helping me recover from that specific incident.
Yeah.
But with a little bit of broader perspective, I found that that really was the kind of the key to unlocking one of the effective ways of dealing with burnout for me.
Yeah. Shifting and taking that quote unquote negative experience and the negative feelings and shifting them into, okay, cool. How do I create a positive outcome from this? How do I
Yeah.
turn this around and create positive? Because, from the learnings and trainings and stuff that I've done is, we have a choice every single day. Do we sit with the negative and dwell on it, or do we turn them into a positive and learn from it? And that's how, I remember I used to have real bad anxiety. Just like most cops could not go into a general admissions concert. You could not find me on the floor of a concert down there with all the people. No, that's just way too unsafe, uncertain. Who knows what's going to happen? Especially after things like Pulse happened. That was my kind of 2016 was my nightmare. End of 2015, 2016 was my nightmare year. And then, Pulse happened. I heard about that. Then there was all the, again, attacking different things, me being an American over here in New Zealand. I had all of that stuff as well. So I can relate without knowing the experience or being in that, but puts all that onto any cop, the what ifs. And so when we shift that, how I shifted my anxiety as such was, had somebody actually, a coach, sit there and go, well, okay, cool. What's the worst that's going to happen? I was like, well, that's going to happen. And they go, okay, cool. Well, can you do anything about it right now? Has it happened? No. Okay. So focus on the fact that you can't do anything about it. But do you have training, Chris? I was like, yeah, I've got more training than most cops do. What are you talking about? Yes. And they go, perfect. Do you know where all the exits are? I was like, yeah. And I was like, yeah, there, and there. They're like, I didn't even know about that one. But I was like, yeah, you can go behind that curtain. And they're like, wow. They're like, so, well, then what are you worried about, Chris? I was like, well, what if this happened? And they're like, well, Chris, if something happens, you already said, you don't know if it's going to happen. And if it happens, it happens. But you know where all the exits are. Well, what are you here for? I'm like, I'm here to have fun. Are you having fun? No.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's that creating that positive from that experience. And I feel like it's you've gotten to a place where you're able to do that quite well. What would be the number one thing that you've learned over the years that would be kind of, with going through the burnout, having these different experiences, the different traumas that come along with policing? We see, 18 times more trauma than a civilian will in their life in our first year of policing, especially in the U.S. That was a study out of New York. Cops are 5 times more likely to get PTSD than any other profession. What is it that you feel is the number one positive learning that you've learned from 19 years in law enforcement?
19 years positive learning with regard to how to manage burnout.
Yeah.
What are we talking
Yeah,
about?
your number one positive learning that you've learned from 19 years as law enforcement.
Oh, man, I'll tell you what, I think the number one positive learning thing that I would take from 19 years in law enforcement is that if you do every single thing the way that you are supposed to do it as a law enforcement officer, you will still do things wrong. Right? There's going to be moments where the best of the best of the best training right up until that point is no longer sufficient once the incident has occurred. Right? When I think about, we can use Pulse as in context, is active shooter training up until that point was you take you and 3 team members and you go in a diamond formation, and following Pulse and incidents afterwards, like Parkland, you get that, no, don't wait for 3 other people. You got to go in by yourself. Right. So even if you did it perfectly, you're still getting criticized. Yeah. And so I think a lot of times the best that we can hope for as law enforcement officers is that we are able to understand the idea that you can do better tomorrow than you did today. Yeah. And better, you may not have any clue what better looks like. Right? Better may be advised from somewhere completely outside the organization, outside the profession, or it might come from within, but better exists and always will. Yeah. And so to be able to take that learning approach to what we do on a regular basis, I think is really, really critical.
I like that. And I'm Chuck, I'm a why guy. I believe every person is driven from an internal why from their childhood, that inner child, as some people call it, or that purpose you could call your why. And I guide people, law enforcement, first responders, to create it into a mission statement, know all the levels of your why, so that what you do serves you. As police officers, we protect. What's the motto on the side of the car? Protect and serve. Well, you can't serve somebody else unless you are able to, unless it's serving you as well. Unless it's filling your tank up, then you can give from your tank up. You can't give from an empty cup. What would you say your why is that's driven you through all these ups, downs, ins, outs, got you into law enforcement, has driven you through pre-law enforcement? What would you say your why is, Chuck?
Man. It seems simple until you try to put it into words. I mean, I do what I do because I love the people who I work with. I love the profession that I chose. And I know that we can, like I said, always be better tomorrow than we are today, whatever better might look like. So for me, I guess my why is to contribute to the law enforcement field, this ability to really kind of take a more objective look at what we do and find ways to improve. And I know from my personal experience, cops can do better. Yeah. Doesn't mean, I'm not saying that we're doing poorly.
Not right? Just cops. Anybody can always do better.
Right. Yeah, and you and I are right there with the whole idea of personal development. It's 100%. That's true to my heart right there. It's home.
You can always do better. I don't care who you are. Even the Dalai Lama can still do better. But if we're not growing, we're dying. So there you go.
But I think that as a profession, we have a really hard time with acknowledging the fact that what we do isn't the best, right? That there could potentially be better out there. And I think that the idea of communicating to find out what that better looks like and leading to allow ourselves to accept that perfection is a disease, right? You can't achieve that. The pursuit of it is part of what contributes to burnout. It's exhausting. So what are you doing? Right? What are you doing? Let's just work on being better. Does it matter who defines better? Not necessarily, as long as we can agree that it is, in fact, better than we're doing right now.
Yeah. one step ahead, one step from where you are now. As I already said, if you're not growing, you're dying. Tony Robbins says that all the time, and I'm a huge fan of his. Any listeners know this, and whether you like him or not, you think it's a cult, whatever it is, he's got some really impactful things, and if you do live by them, I guarantee you'll change your life completely. And if you're not growing, you're dying. We have to grow. Our bodies are growing. They're growing right now. In the time that we've talked, they've already grown. They've shed cells and recreated cells, and it's science. And so I love that, the fact of the contribution. And it's funny because I'm a coach in this, so I literally have been sitting here listening through all the things and the times when you've lit up, and it's because you're contributing to impacting people and impacting a change or a difference. And you've got it there. That literally, you've nailed it on the head. It's awesome to see that you've been able to put it into some words and that. What would you say to listeners that are struggling, or law enforcement especially? I feel like your first couple years in law enforcement, and I'm speaking from my personal experience, and tell me if you agree with this or not, Chuck. First couple years, or even before you join, you've got this drive, you've got this passion, this purpose, and it feels like you're hitting target consistently. You're like, yeah, I can do this. This is where I want to go. This is the vehicle that's going to get me to be able to do this, to be able to impact, to be able to whatever it is that your thing is. Maybe you're just at the surface level of how to help people, but you subconsciously know there's something different, like you contribute to making a bigger impact. And then you're in for a couple years, and something, maybe it's a couple years. For you, it was like, what, 8 years you said? And something happens. And you kind of get hit, and you're like, oh, fuck, that hurt a little bit. And then you get hit again, and they just start to narrow you down. You start to lose that why, that purpose. You start to lose focus of it. And my belief is, I use the analogy of shooting at the target. All of us cops and that, we're even a lot of Americans, very good at shooting. We can hit a target. But if I put a blindfold on you, you're probably not going to hit the target very much. And so when we can't articulate it, like we've just gone through, you start to, it's like you're shooting at the target blindfolded. But once you can articulate it, you have something to focus on. You stay focused on it, you can take it off. So what would you tell people that are law enforcement or first responders or civilians that are struggling to really know or identify the why, like you've been able to kind of figure out as well? I've got my process, obviously, that I coach people on, but what would you say that what would your methodology or how would you recommend people to kind of figure it out?
It starts with learning more about yourself. 100%. There's no two ways about it. Just to build off of your shooting analogy is, I always look at law enforcement. Yeah. Okay. You might be blindfolded. More than likely though, what's really happening is you're shooting at a target that somebody's downrange moving. Right. Just as you got your sights lined up, and then all of a sudden it slid left, and you're like, but I just shot. That was going to hit the bullseye. That's more the way I look at it.
Yeah, I like that as well. Yeah.
If you learn more about yourself, right? If you focus on what you're doing, your trigger control, your sight, your sight picture, your muzzle discipline, those little things that you are actually physically in control of, and you focus on performing those better each day, then what that allows you to do is to see how you can help other people to do the same thing. Yeah. Right? The end result depends on a lot of things that may be out of your control. Yeah. But the process itself, you have a lot of control over. And I don't know that there's really, no matter what your passion is, if you're not sharing that with other people to help them find and ignite their own passion, then it's probably not your why. Yeah. Right? It's probably not your why.
Yeah, no, I like that. Mine is, I help people, I help myself and others truly see ourselves, so we create the best version of ourselves. That's my mission statement. That's what I live by. Yeah. That's why I run the podcast, so people can hear about, tools to save themselves. So yeah. So, and that stems from that, and I believe they all stem back from our childhood. Just like anything does, if you've done enough personal development, you realize that all your trauma, that literally all the things that affect you in law enforcement now, stem back and have some sort of correlation with pre-7. Something happened pre-7 that then when something happened when you're in law enforcement, I'm going to use the example of the Pulse shooting, the not feeling like you did enough or something, has to do with you didn't feel enough when you were a kid, most likely.
Yep. I think
and
that's
then
probably true.
and that seed was planted and it grew over time, over time, over time, and then that happened and boom. And I can only say that from my personal experience and also going through and doing all that learning and coaching. And as you said earlier on, and I loved it when you were talking about being part of the mental health trainer, the train the trainer stuff. When we teach, and this is, I love the contribution side that you're talking about to find your why. When we teach, we learn more about ourselves through the teaching than the other person probably even gets around themselves, because we learn by teaching. And so when we're coaching people or we're doing personal development or mental health stuff for somebody else and we're listening to them, we start to see ourselves in it. And if we're an aware person, police officer, we recognize it, acknowledge it, accept it, and move through it. Because at the end of the day, otherwise just keep going the same thing. And police officers, we have egos. We love our egos because it's like, I used to say all the time, if I'm having a bad day, guess what? You're going to have a bad day. And I'm sure you can relate, and the other officers out there can relate. And it's a horrible thing to have. And it's all because we don't want to look at our internal sides. And I'm not telling anybody what to do, but just giving some awareness. So Chuck, as we kind of wrap up, tell us a little bit about the leadership business that you started up a couple years ago.
Yeah, so 2020, actually 1 week, 10 days to the day before the US shut down as a result of coronavirus, I founded my own training company. And part of that had to do with a lot. I was getting asked to do a lot of different training events that had nothing to do. It started with the content that I created in the wake of Pulse, but I got invited to do a lot of different training events, building off of the communication stuff. And talking about the way that communication impacts our work environments as a whole. And so what I decided is to separate that from, because the Pulse presentation was for the agency, to separate that from what I was doing. And so I created my own training company right as the pandemic hit real hard. I think I had 5 speaking engagements or training engagements canceled in the first 3 months after founding my company. But I'm everything happens for a reason. It gave me a real good opportunity to sit down and focus on some content. And one of the things that it allowed me to do is just kind of gradually roll things out and work with some really great people nationally, internationally. I just got back from Canada last month, teaching and training up there, doing some negotiation work with ideologically motivated individuals. And so, starting my business, I also believe that your communication skills are really the foundation of any leadership skills you have. We
foundation
all
of anything.
100%. So the leadership literature points out is old school, Bass and Bass, their little leadership handbook, talks about the difference between task-oriented and relationship-oriented leadership. Right? You have these two different sides of a spectrum. And in law enforcement, we are overwhelmingly task-focused. Yep. Can you do the job correctly? Can you do the job correctly? When you get things coming down the chain of command, they come in the forms of orders. Do this. There's very little relationship concern. And the problem is that when you're leading, and cops are first line leaders, right? People call us for solutions. They need advice, they need guidance. We are first line leaders. When you're leading people, you have to have that relationship component. Yeah. And I think the law enforcement profession as a whole struggles to find balance between those two. Yeah. And so my company, Communication Synergy, is designed to help work through that issue and to find ways where organizations can better facilitate communication skills for their personnel.
Nah, I love that. I love that. It's so important. I say this all the time around, relationships and as you said, building those partnerships and relationships, and that it's all comes down to communication. It also comes down to yourself. If you want to work through and not burn out or overcome PTSD and burnout, you got to be able to communicate with yourself.
Yes,
And be honest
absolutely.
with yourself. The amount of
That's
people out
always
there that
where
I'm
it
like,
starts.
yeah, I'm like, you're not honest with yourself. Like, if somebody asks you how you're doing, tell them.
Well, I think you're right in that sometimes it's denial, but sometimes it's just complete lack of awareness, right?
Yeah,
That whole emotional intelligence component.
yeah,
We don't train for emotional intelligence in law enforcement. You got to memorize stuff and regurgitate it.
yeah.
So,
Exactly. You got to be able to, when that gang member goes, "Why'd you stop me?" You got to be able to regurgitate what act,
yep,
section, and
yep,
all of that, and why.
absolutely.
And so yeah, we become emotionally and disconnected as such, which is the worst cop. I would, yeah. If somebody wants to get, because I like to give you the opportunity to, give people, how people can get in touch with you, because I believe that everybody has something to bring to this world, and I love everybody that I interview is always so amazing. So I like to contribute to them. So how does somebody, and we'll put them in put it in the details down below in the description. How does somebody get in touch with you or learn more about you and what you do, both law enforcement wise, but also with your company?
So yeah, so the majority of the time, I would tell you to go to my website, which is www.communicationsynergy.com, CYNERGY. However, every summer, I take a look at what I've learned over the past year and take an opportunity to reevaluate what I'm doing and see if I can make it better. And so right now, if you go to that website, it's down. My unpaid intern and I, which is my wife, are working on cleaning up, renovating their website, and it should be back up by August 1st with a new look and a little bit better detail, a little bit better focus. And so normally you'd be able to get a hold of me through that website. Just there's a contact page there. The other way is email communication synergy. That's communication CYNERGY at gmail.com.
Okay, cool, perfect. Well, we'll put those down in the description. So for those that are listening or watching, they can access those. Last question I like to ask as we wrap it up: what would you say your top tip to self happiness is, Chuck?
Oh man, find what you love, do it, and share that love with other people who are interested.
I love it. I love it. Any last words, Chuck, before we wrap up?
No, Chris, I really appreciate you having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. I appreciate it as well, man. It's been a good chat. Was able to talk to somebody that was at something that I remember very vividly when it happened over here, and I remember the ripple effect that it had around the world. So I wanna thank you for being so honest and open and ability to communicate and talk about that. So that's amazing. For everybody listening, as I always say, just take one thing away from this. There's a lot of really good, as I call them, nuggets. I've been brought aware that I say that a lot, so I'm going to keep calling them nuggets in this episode. If you need to, go back and listen to it again. But whatever's popping up right now, take that one thing, write it down, put it in your phone, wherever you need to, and just start implementing it. Because if we take action on one thing in 365 days, it's going to be completely different. Then come back and listen to this episode again. Also, please share this out. Like, subscribe, all those fun things so we can keep bringing you good content. And remember, if you are in a state where you're like, I want to learn more, I want to have those first day feelings back, I feel like I'm burning out, you can relate to Chuck's story or my story, reach out. It's team@createfromwhy.com so that we can organize a time to talk and see how we can help you, or if we can't, how we can send you or give you some assistance somewhere else. But till next time, thank you, and hope you enjoyed that. We'll talk to you next time.